Well, I think we need to protect workers. We need a good strategy to make sure that, in fact, we push our agenda. Look, on the issues, Chuck, that I'm talking about, these are the things that I have been fighting for years. But there is no compromise, none whatsoever, on bigotry. There is no compromise on climate change because the future of the planet is at stake. We need a strategy, and I'm going to work on this strategy, to go to Michigan, to go to Wisconsin, to stand with working people, to demand that we reverse the decline of the American middle class.
And he's taken his 2 clean pair of underwear. Some people have 4 or 5, but he's got 2. Remember that Larry David imitation on Saturday Night Live? Welcome to the panel, ladies and gentlemen. We first introduce to you Brent Budowsky, contributor for The Hill and former aide to Senator Lloyd Bentsen. He is a Green Bay Packers fan in mourning today following their 42-24 loss to the Redskins. And Tom Borelli, a quasi-Packers fan, who's not really nearly as much in mourning. Dr. Tom Borelli, Ph.D., contributor for Conservative Review. All right, Brent, let me start with you because you wrote a piece, I believe, on Friday at The Hill talking about a possible deal, or that's today actually you wrote a piece talking about a possible deal between Trump and Bernie Sanders, who we just saw there, and Chuck Schumer and Steve Bannon on this infrastructure deal.
Yeah, well, one thing that Trump advocates, which I happen to agree with, is a very large Rebuild America plan to rebuild the roads and bridges and ports. And I would add, by the way, that Steve Bannon, who I don't agree with that much, is a major champion of that, to his credit. And what I write in The Hill today is there may be grounds for I call it the deal of the century, between Bannon, Trump, Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer, Democrats, and many Republicans, to do a real program to rebuild America, which was the heart of where Clinton went wrong in the Midwest and the Rust Belt, and where Trump went right. And this is one thing that most of us ought to be able to agree on. So I think on this case, I never thought I'd say this, but I totally agree with Steve Bannon on this, and I think there are ways to get him and Bernie together and to do something that would create good American, high-paying jobs.
But let me ask you quickly, Brent, before I go to Tom, I think there's a disagreement in the way that this would be paid for. We saw a $1 billion stimulus plan under the Obama administration early on, and, you know, we heard about signs being built costing, you know, $80,000 a sign or whatever. It didn't really work. It didn't accomplish what it set out to accomplish, and we're talking about a different way of funding this in the minds, at least, of Donald Trump, I believe, than just, you know, with outright spending.
Yeah, and by the way, what I recommended today in what I wrote in The Hill, and what a lot of Democrats and Republicans have historically supported, is not to fund it by appropriated money, but to fund it through either call it a Rebuild America bank, or you could even offer bonds on the public market to rebuild it. So investors pay for the bonds, buy the bonds. They can then sell them and trade them, and the bonds will fund the infrastructure. Yeah. You don't need to do it, and should not do it, through appropriated taxpayer money. We don't have that kind of money. Well, there are other ways to do it.
Dr. Borelli, I think that sounds very appetizing. If you're Bannon and Trump on the right side, and you could work with an idea like that.
Absolutely. Look, what we know about Donald Trump, he's the art of the deal. We do need some infrastructure, but let's not do it on the back of the taxpayers. Let's do it on the back of investors. It sounds like a grand idea, and everybody was so horrified about Steve Bannon. All of a sudden, he's part of this architecture. Look, a lot of people were overly scared about the Trump administration. You can see the people he's bringing into his cabinet, the people he's interviewing, even Mitt Romney. I think you're going to see a lot of things. At the end of the day, it's going to be jobs, jobs. And that's really going to help not only the country, but really Trump and the Republican Party.
Which brings me, Brent, to a column you wrote on Friday at The Hill, and that's about Mitt Romney. And I've talked to several people today. Earlier on, I talked to John Sununu about Romney. He said he'd like to see him as Secretary of State. I spoke to people in America Talks Live earlier today, Pete Hoekstra, who said that he'd be shocked, but he said Romney would be implementing Trump's policies. But let me ask you this. Would Romney, I can't even believe I'm saying would Romney be anything, but wouldn't Romney be better served along the lines of what you and Tom are just talking about, turning things around economically, making things work economically, and getting things done from an economic standpoint? Because that's really where Romney's expertise is, rather than Secretary of State.
Well, Romney would be good at that on the economy, too. The point about Secretary of State is that Trump took a number of positions that disquieted NATO, alienated or worried or frightened some of our European allies, and seemed overly friendly to Vladimir Putin, who I have called the strongman dictator of Russia. Now, if he were to pick Romney, that would reassure virtually everybody in the Democratic world that they shouldn't be that afraid, that Romney will be a steady hand. And I would also add, since I wrote that piece on Friday, Trump has talked about possibly naming former Marine Corps General Jim Mattis to be Secretary of Defense. That would be an outstanding choice. Mattis is the Marines' Marine. He is not soft on anybody. He has tremendous credibility. And it is possible, if Trump wants to really bring everybody together, we'll see, to pick someone like Romney as Secretary of State and someone like General Mattis as Secretary of Defense. That would be actually an outstanding combination for Republicans.
It is such a pleasure to hear, someone from the quote-unquote left talk and speak the way you're talking and speaking, as opposed to me putting on the cable news shows when I get up in the morning and when I go home in the evening, because I like to elevate my blood pressure and hear them call all the people you're praising, except Romney. Now they love Romney, but calling them all names and radicals and racists and this and that. Tom, what does it say to you? To me, it just speaks to who Donald Trump really is in his heart and really is in his private life. And has been his whole life, to reaching out to or accepting the reaching out of a guy like Romney, who I've said all along today, gratuitously, he wasn't running against him, bashed the heck out of him repeatedly in vicious tones, and here Trump is ready to possibly make him Secretary of State.
So much about those fears of Trump's temperament. Look, at the end of the day, Trump is the CEO. He's going to assemble the best team he can to do the best for the American people. That's his pedigree. That's the way he views the world. And it's great that he's bringing in Romney in. For me, I'd rather put Romney ahead of the VA. If there's not a department that needs a complete rehaul, over-ramping, and totally restructured, it would be the VA. And it would be nothing better than to help all those millions of veterans who are out there who can't get health care, and tragically, too many are committing suicide.
All right, I want you guys to hear John McCain. He was speaking at a forum. Now, again, I respect the hell out of John McCain for what he did for this country, better man than I, and for certainly what he put up with and the torture he went through. I don't know how he did it. I can't imagine it. However, that does not insulate him from criticism on political issues, including waterboarding, and here's what he had to say the other day.
You've got the Geneva Conventions, which we're signatories to, which prohibit waterboarding, and we now have a law. Now, prior to that law, we just didn't do it until this administration. The CIA decided to do it. They cannot do that. If they started waterboarding, I swear to you, there's a whole bunch of us that would have them in court in a New York minute. And there's no judge in America that wouldn't say they're in violation of the law, because it's specifically in law now prohibited. So I don't give a damn what the President of the United States wants to do or anybody else wants to do. We will not waterboard.
I don't give a damn what the President of the United States wants to do, Brent. I mean, if the Congress were to vote to bring it back, to do away with the ban on it, which I hope they would do, and the President signs it, there's not much John McCain could do to fight it.
Well, I happen to agree with McCain on waterboarding, which I am against. I'm against torture. But let me tell you what may be going on here. And I speak as someone who has had these classified briefings over the years, the kind of briefings that Trump is getting right now. When he meets with General Mattis, and when he meets with Mitt Romney, and when he gets the top secret code word clearance briefings, he may well be coming to the conclusion, having seen things that most people never see. I saw much of it, but not all of it. He's seeing everything now. Maybe waterboarding isn't that great an idea. Maybe there are more important things to do to kill ISIS, which, as everybody knows, I have long been in favor of doing, much more than Obama or most Republicans want to do. So I think when you go through these briefings, I can tell you, when you have a classified briefing about the end of the world and they tell you how you're going to die in a nuclear war, trust me, that makes one heck of an impression.
Right.
Trump may be going through that right now, and I, again, would be encouraged by Mattis as DOD, by Romney, And, you know, the election's over. I certainly was not a big fan of Donald Trump, and I'm not right now. But there are things that help all of America defend our security, and those would be two guys who I think would be good for America. I might choose a different president and different people, but they're both first-rate people.
Tom, we got 30 seconds or less. I know you agree with those two being great picks.
No, absolutely, they're great picks, and I believe Mr. Trump will make the best decision upon counsel of the people who advise him, especially on military affairs. So I don't see anything out of line here. I'm not sure why McCain went off on this deep end.
He was asked about. He was egged on by the moderator.
There you go.
All right, Tom and Brent, thank you both very, very much. Up next, Jeff Rorter, spokesman for the St. Louis Police Officers Association, will take a look at the horrific police shootings in a 24-hour period over the weekend.